Alright, so let's talk about what's been changed. So, first of all, it's been a few days and I haven't been getting as much work done as I want because I have an interview tomorrow for like an internship next summer. Um, and it's a pretty rigorous one, so I've been kind of studying just like DSA stuff, matrices, BFS, DFS, backtracking, DP, that kind of thing. It's been taking a lot of my time. I've been waking up early to study more, so hoping for the best tomorrow. But when I have a chance, I have been working on this kind of like bare bones movement system that I have. It's in a pretty workable place now. There are a couple of things that I want to add, but I can talk about that in a little bit. Most of them are like quality of life things. Um, so first, let's take a look at what it looks like right now. And I don't remember exactly where I was last time when I made a devlog, but if I recall, I had pretty much just implemented like sliding down slopes or going up slopes. Um, and their basic movement stuff, and I just made the jump to raycasting. I followed a really good tutorial on it, and like here I'll even probably like link it in the comment, but it's link it in the description. But it's by this guy named Sebastian Lang, um, and it was so like well made. He like talked about all the math. He like talked about like the trick behind jumping with raycasting and stuff like that. It was just super informative. You guys should all probably check it out, but it was nice, and it helped me design the system that I have right now. Um, okay, so let's just play it out really quick. I made like a tiny little parkour, very easy, that basically demonstrates all the different features. So if we hit play, first thing we see is the camera is centered around the player. We see a moving platform, right? And like when the platform comes, I'll jump on it, and then we see that the camera moves with the player. So that's one of the things, the camera that follows. And then we've got two things that we see here. We see first sliding down walls, and then we see second wall jumping, right? Now there are two different kinds of wall jumps. There's this one, which is where the input for the wall jump is in the same direction that the wall is right now, and so the cool thing that makes this and the other kind of wall jump possible is that you don't have to hold the movement key to stay on the wall like a lot of games have you do. You'll just slide down it normally. Um, so that's cool, right? And then we just saw it, but the other jump system is basically, oh, okay. Yeah, I need to work on the gravity. That's one thing that I want to fix, is that players get like, I need to mess with the gravity equation a little bit, because the gravity equation allows for this nice jump that's like not too floaty, pretty nice, and like really easy to adjust, but then also like you just fall so fast. Um, there's just not a lot of forgiveness for areas like this one in the bottom right where there's like no ground below them. But okay, so let's just get on here, and then so this is the first kind of jump, right? And it's like a kind of shorter jump that's just directly upwards and can be used, oh my god, and can be just used to climb the wall, right? And then we have the second kind of jump, which is like a leap from one wall in the opposite direction, right? So I'll show that here. So let me get high enough, and then you see that? You see how this jump in this direction is much greater than the jump in this direction, and it's different based on the key that's being held down. So if a key in the opposite direction of the side of the character that's being touched is being held, then they leap much further. And like, see? Versus like, if I just hold in this direction, the leap is like much shorter, right? So that was like a big thing, is allowing users to leap between walls, and like you can use that to like traverse this wall system pretty fast, right? Combining the two different kind of jumps. So there's the sliding, the two kind of leaps. There are actually three, but one of them doesn't get used much very often, is when there are no movement inputs and a jump is held. So like, let's see if I can, it's like this, right? And the kind of idea, here's the math for them, is that like the x, like the x change and the y change, so all of them are 20y, which is same height, but this is when you're towards the wall that you're on, like when you're climbing the wall. This is when you're just jumping off of the wall, and this is when you're leaping off the wall. And obviously they correspond to like, this is climbing, and then like this is jumping, and then this is leaping, right? And so the kind of idea for me is that like, based on what the user needs, they can transition between their states. So if they want to climb, they just hold and whatever. Okay, so you have that, and then we have this here, which is going down and up slopes, pretty good. One thing that I do want to fix is like this little bounce that happens right here. You see this? Like this bounce here. It's a little bit annoying. I'm not 100% sure how to fix it, but I'm sure I can figure it out. And then there's this. And then another thing that I want to try and change is with the follow camera. I need to play around with the offset so that when the character's in the bottom left or right of the camera and there's places to go on that side, it doesn't cut them off screen. So like if I just take the character and I'll just put the character right here and I'll play it, right? You see how like the character is here at the bottom of the camera in Unity, and because of that, because they haven't moved enough to like get what is supposed to be here in screen yet, it like feels like during this point in time, or like we even saw it like right there, where I couldn't see that there was a platform down there, and that's like super unintuitive to the player because they don't know where to go. And even if they could make the general distinction that like, oh, well, the platforms are going down to the bottom right, so there's probably something down there, and oh, I landed on it, right? It doesn't feel good to the player. And like, there are a couple of ways to tinker around with that. Like, I can change the vertical offset. Maybe if I move that down by 2, let's see if that helps. Or move that down to 2. Yeah, you see that helps a little bit. And so like, there's just a little bit of tinkering to do. And then this is also kind of like where system design and level design kind of meet, because like I can keep on trying to make this camera fit any level I want, but like I also have to make the levels fit to the constraints of what I've designed, right? And so like maybe I just won't make a level that has this much difference between the peaks and the valleys, right? So that when the camera is basically centered in a way where the player's near the top of the camera, then going up, they won't miss out on seeing this kind of thing, right? And like, that's more of a hypothetical, because the bigger issue that I ran into is when the player's at the bottom of the camera, but you understand what I'm saying. So that's basically what I've worked on so far, and like we see the moving platforms here, and they have like waypoints where it starts here, and then you see it goes to negative 30 x from where it starts at, because this counts as the origin. No matter where you place it, the first waypoint is the origin. So then you translate it by negative 30, and then this is supposed to be basically like a way of the character like moving back and forth between the start and the end. And like obviously there's a little bit of changing I need to do. I think one thing that a lot of games do to get past this issue of needing to use these moving moving platforms to cross large spaces, unless it's intentional for the player to be punished really heavily for missing the platform, is having multiple platforms, right? So even if they miss the timing on one of them, they don't have to wait the entire time, because like for instance, like this platform here would go from here to here and then come back, and then it would meet another platform here to here, and so on and so forth, so that even if the player missed this one, right, they weren't really waiting for that long. To, you know, just again about user experience. These subtle design things are super important, and I really love like thinking about them and trying to implement them. So then, what do I want to add? So that's kind of a change that I want to make to the design philosophy for platforms. And then I also talked about like how characters interact with these corners, or how the character interacts with this corner, where it just kind of like bounces around. You see, it just kind of bounces around just because it's like a ray casting issue. And then another thing that I want to look at is something called coyote timing, however you say it. And basically the idea behind coyote timing, dude, how do you say that word? I feel like I've said it a million times in my life. Coyote, whatever. So the kind of idea behind it is that the player has a little bit of like flexibility on the timing to jump after they have lost contact with a surface that they could jump off of, right? So right now, pretty much the second that the player is no longer touching the ground, they can't jump, right? But something that happens a lot is that like it works in theory that, oh, if player is not touching ground, player can't jump, because I don't want my player to double jump unless they're on walls, right? And like it's pretty simple. But what happens a lot is like that basically forces the player to, if they want to maximize their jump, and especially if you design a puzzle where they have to, you know, like where the difference between making it to the next platform is like jumping from here and jumping from here, like this kind of thing, and they miss this timing by a few frames, they're gonna just fall off of the ledge and not be able to jump, right? And so what that's gonna do is it's gonna make it super inconsistent for them to extend their jump as far as they can, especially not only just due to human error, but also by wanting to optimize it as much as possible. They want to go as far as they can without like pressing the jump so that their jump takes them further, right? And so coyote timing is basically when you add like a sort of buffer on time that they can be off the ground or like not have that is below, um, like collision below detection triggered, yes, and they're still able to jump, right? And like a game that does that, shows that really well, is one called Celeste, which is like the one of the movement platformers that's really popular. Um, they have really good use of like timing and jumping and stuff like that. So there's that, and then I also want to add jump buffering, which is basically where, again, same issue of players trying to optimize their inputs and having to be able to do so, having to have really frame perfect inputs, where basically like, let's say that um, you're trying to spam jump, right? Like, let's say you as a designer have designed a level where the player constantly has objects being thrown at them and they have to constantly jump over them, right? And to counter the next object that they're about to jump from, right? They're about to land, and then what happens, right? What happens if they hit their jump here? If they press jump here, right? Because if we look at it, we know, zoomed in all the way, that this is not touching the ground, right? So the collision detection for is below, right? And again, that's the prerequisite, one of the prerequisites to being able to jump. That is not met. But in the player's mind, right, especially playing like this, they feel as though they're on the ground, right? And they hit the jump here, and they don't jump, right? And now, even if they realize that, oh, I wasn't on the ground yet, right? Even if they're like, oh, I wasn't on the ground, and like that makes sense that I didn't jump, right? It still feels really bad when it doesn't jump here. And so now I'm not saying don't have the player be on the ground before they jump. I'm saying we should add a buffer, right? Which basically means that they hit the jump input here, then maybe like half a millisecond later, they, or not even, bro, like, I don't know, a very small increment of time, they come down and they make contact with the ground, right? Or they're not even contacting the ground, but let's say they are. Then the jump input will play, right? And that makes it much more smooth, right? And so these two things, coyote timing and jump buffering, are basically two concepts that allow for fluidity even in case of human error, right? And like, obviously, nobody playing your game is going to be like a machine assisted speedrunner, right? They're just going to be like normal people who are playing the game and just casually playing this platformer that their friend made, or like that they saw on the itch.io store for free, something like that, right? So making the game feel good and friendly is like the biggest piece of like user experience. And I mean, I talked about the importance of good movement in like, I think my first or second devlog, where I talked about like how necessary it is for people to actually not feel hindered by the movement system that they're using to actually want to keep on playing your game, no matter the theme or the graphics or the soundtrack or even how complex and interesting the mechanics are. If they don't actually enjoy the act of playing the game, even if they think the game is cool, they won't play it. People won't continue to play your game. People won't even try it for that long, right? And like, that's why movement is important. And I mean, there are a ton of things that factor in like that, but I think something like as integral and like fundamental to the way that your game plays out as the movement system really needs that. And you know, that's why I first set out to develop the movement system before anything else, before even looking at sprites, before even really coming up with an idea for the game. Like, I kind of had one in the back of my head, but it's like, you know, this is so important. So I feel like I'm starting to reach a place where it's better. I think the jumps need to be tweaked a lot. But I think that to tweak the jumps, I also want to start figuring out what sprite I want to use so I can figure out what scale of map that I'm going to use. And then, you know, when I figure all of that out, then I can start to really, really fine-tune the jumping and the speed and the sliding and the movement, all of that. But yeah, that's where I'm at right now. So, I mean, I think this devlog is going to be a little bit long because it's been a couple of days. I have quite a bit to talk about. So now let's talk about like things that I want to do. So I might have mentioned this in one of my earlier devlogs, but my goal right now as a sophomore CS student is that I really want to get experience. And for those of you who are watching this later on, like right now it's um, like August, right? Yeah, it's August in 2023, and kind of like the economic bubble popped. I think is the terminology that people are using. Basically, like all of the repercussions of all of the like financial scrambling we had to do during COVID to keep people and the economy afloat, quote unquote, keep them afloat. I don't know if it really happened. I think a lot of people actually ended up struggling, but that's beside the point. Um, is catching up to us. You know, like all of the money that was kind of just injected into the economy, all the stimulus, like that kind of thing is really catching up to us. Job market's not doing too great, and you know, trickle down effect. Job market's not doing good. Companies are letting people go. Companies are letting people go. They don't have so many people to actually keep their infrastructure running, to support interns, to even teach the interns. They don't have the money for the interns, you know, and some companies do, you know. Some companies are still like companies that are really off the ground, like larger studios and stuff like that. Um, are doing like okay. They're taking less interns. You know, there are way less intern postings. Um, just you know, my point is basically that like right now, my goal is to try and find an internship. Um, because you know that'll help me get real world experience, help me make connections, possibly a job out of college. But you know it can't do anything bad for me, and it's a positive step for my career, either in software engineering or in game development. So there are a couple of things I'm considering on that link then. So I've reached out to a couple of game studios, and there's actually one that was interested in chatting with me about potentially interning for them. Um, but the thing that I've come to realize is that many of these studios that create on this level, that are in a position to be able to um, like support an intern, or even just many of the games that, or many of the companies that create games on a large scale, i.e. they have the infrastructure for an intern, tend to use Unreal Engine. And I know that's not the case for all of them. I know that many use Unity, or even like something like Godot. But like the two studios that I talked to who were willing to consider it, both use Unreal. Um, Epic, which is the only company that I'm aware of right now, other than maybe like Tencent, that has um, like internships open for like gameplay programming, which just released like 2 days ago. I applied, but my portfolio doesn't really fit them yet, so I'm not too sure where that'll go. They use Unreal Engine, and they ask that you have portfolio pieces in Unreal Engine, that you have experience and demonstrate experience with C++, right? So when I use Unity, not only is it not Unreal Engine, but it also uses C Sharp. I mean, I bet you could probably do C++ in it, but most of the things are C Sharp, and I just think that if I want to work in AAA, if my goal isn't to create my own game studio, which right now it's not, um, that's not something that I think will be possible for me until, if I want to do it, until I work professionally for a while, build connections, and like actually get good at game development before I can start my own studio. So it's going to be more like a work for 10, 15 years in the AAA industry, and then if I want to, I'll keep on working in indie. But, you know, that's like way further down the line, many years. So the kind of idea right now is I'm considering swapping over to Unreal Engine. Um, and another reason that's kind of urging me towards Unreal Engine is when I was looking through different game styles or the ways that people have made their games, one that really, really stood out to me was the way that Octopath Traveler did it. And let me actually see if I can find it. So let's see. 2D HD. I'll bring this up on the screen. 2D HD. Okay, yeah, so here's a good example. So Octopath Traveler did this basically thing called 2D HD, which is where their game is functionally two-dimensional, right? Their sprites are 2D. They walk on like a fairly linear plane, and even though they can move up and down, it doesn't have a lot of like the 3D camera switching or camera movement aspects that 3D games have, but they're built in Unreal Engine on a 3D map, you know? And I think this art style is really cool. It seems really fun. I mean, especially like, which screenshot is it? There's this one screenshot of people going over a bridge that I think is super cool. This one is really nice too. And this is something that's, I think you can accomplish in Unity, but it's way easier in Unreal. Many people who have seen tutorials on it, talk pieces about it, articles have just been like, yeah, this was made in Unreal, and it's because Unreal is best support for 3D. I don't know if that's true, but that's kind of what I'm starting to find. So I'm thinking about it. One thing is that like I really need to flesh out what I want this game to be before I can start making decisions like that. And like I want it to be like a platformer roguelike, you know. I've kind of mentioned Dead Cells a few times. And I don't know if that needs Unreal Engine for a game that's as like low footprint as that, especially if I want it to be like pixelated, 16-bit. And maybe it's better to actually just create something before I swap around. Because I already swapped like the game type that I was making once from like a text-based adventure, and I was just like, that's pointless. And I'm not learning anything into this kind of platformer. So I have to kind of decide on that, stuff like that. But those are kind of the thoughts in my head right now. For now, I'm probably just going to keep on preparing for my interview. It's tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. It's a super large company. I'm kind of surprised I got an interview, but I'm very excited. Oh, sorry. It'll be my first one. So, first tech interview. Dude, I am accidentally breaking my Fitbit. But anyways. So, I think that's going to be all for this devlog. I talked about the updated movement system. I talked about potential thoughts in the future. Damn, my Fitbit's broken, bro. I did that too. It's okay. So those are just thoughts on my mind right now. Not much more to say. Sorry, I kind of rambled for this one because I was just like, oh, I have a little bit of time before I go work out, and I should make my devlog because I've been meaning to make it. So, yeah. Alright, I think that's gonna be everything for today. Yeah. Thank you for watching. Have a good one. Dude. Alright, bye guys.